Hello, David Zritsky for the Bond Experience. Welcome back. I am here, so damn excited. I'm here with none other than Tom Sears from James Bond Radio. Tom, welcome back to the show.
Hey, dude. Thank you for having me, man.
You look good, man. You look. What are you in your studio? Your music studio?
Yeah, absolutely. That's precisely where I am. I've gained a lot of poundage over the Christmas period, so I'm struggling to get back into the realms of things. I've haven't exercised for a while. I've been eating terribly, and I've been eating very well, it must be said, over the Christmas period. A little too well, you know what I'm saying?
Do you have a plan of action to get back into shape? Because you were in great shape. That's how you got your wife.
Well, yeah, maybe, but yes, I do. It is going to kick off next week. Yeah.
Nice. Are you going to have some of that Heineken 00? No calorie, no alcohol.
When I'm working, obviously, that's all I drink.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you because so here's the premise of this video. I have to explain it because I've been wrestling with 3 or 4 subjects, and I thought to myself, I could go on a video and I could talk to myself, and then I'm like, no, you know something? Let me get somebody that, number one, I really respect. Number one, the community respects, has some really great ideas. But that guy wasn't available, so I called you, and you're always available. No, that was
beautiful.
That was a nice little send up. But no, these are things that I think this would be a great conversation to have with Tom, because it's things that we've talked about personally. And then I thought, you know what, the Bond community as a whole might be interested, because the theme of this video is about fans. I mean, and I think people sometimes forget when you do a podcast or when you do a YouTube channel that we're kind of this presence, but we're fans. We're just like super fans that are utilizing channels. So that's kind of the theme today. So right up our alley, right?
Yeah, absolutely, man. No, I'm excited to get cracking.
All right, so I'm gonna talk about a basic one that might be a very quick discussion, but it's been brought up several times. Is there a difference, in your opinion, no holds barred, is there a difference between British James Bond fans and American James Bond fans? I'll let that sit.
Well, it's funny because I remember, I think it might have been the first time I hung out with him, actually. I hung out with him was with John from the Music of Bond episodes from JBR. We hung out in LA because I was living there for a while, and that's obviously where he's based. And we hung out, and I think we went to a screening or something, and we went to Amoeba Records, which, if you don't know, is a place in Hollywood that's this amazing, vinyl record shop. And we went in there and we both bought a copy of like a reissue of From Russia with Love on vinyl. I still to this day don't even have a record player, but I wanted that anyway. And I remember saying to him, I was like, what is it about Bond for you then? As an American, like I was just thinking, he's such a British, Bond is such a British thing. I thought it wouldn't be as big a deal for people overseas. And then obviously this is obviously going back in the day a little bit. And he's like, no, I don't give a shit where he's from. It's like, it's just all about how cool the man is. So so there is that to be said to start with. I think it's a tricky one, because ultimately I think there's a national identity that I think if you generalize everybody, and it is a massive generalization, I will preface that, is the British are a grumpy sort of people. It must be said. Like right now, we're in the dead of winter. It's dark at 4:00 in the afternoon. And, we're all sort of just a bit downtrodden, and it's raining and all the rest of it. Whereas the Americans seem to be endlessly optimistic and endlessly positive in the grand scheme of things. I suppose that's from the British perspective. So that'll tell you something just from there, So there is that. So, yeah, I would say a difference is I think the British are naturally a bit cynical, and we expect the worst all the time. Whereas I think the Americans have more of a flavor of looking to, a more optimistic outlook, I would say.
All right. And that sometimes probably affects our love of James Bond. If something like a trailer or something or product or something comes out, you may look at it, or British people may look at it with a sardonic, almost ironic eye. whereas Americans will be like, "Yay, Funko Pops, bring
Yeah,
it
yeah.
on." And that could be true. The way I've heard it described, and I wanted to poke your brain on this a little bit, is because in obviously in Britain, in the UK in general, you've all been brought up with James Bond. It was a part of your holiday watching. You
Oh,
know,
yeah.
it was passed down from father to son, and I mean, it has so much ingrained in not just the movies, but part of your culture. They
Yeah.
said, yes, you can have Bonds from the US and other parts of the world, but it's never going to be as deep. It's almost like, you know, your adopted child is not going to be as loved as your, you know, the child that came out of your womb. What do you think
Right.
about that theory?
Yeah, I suppose there is a bit of that, like in the sense that when we had the Olympics in London in 2012, that was like, I think that was that did nothing but help Skyfall be as successful as it was, especially in this country anyway, because they had that little Danny Boyle movie that they played before the opening ceremonies there, where it was Bond and the Queen and all the rest of it. So when you've got a character literally acting in a scene with the Queen like that, it doesn't get higher higher level than that, you know. So there is definitely that, and I suppose the thing is he's pretty much like our only one of all the heroes that are around these days. You know what I mean? In the sense when you reel off the list of American heroes, it goes on all day.
It goes on
all day long. You know, you got your Batmans and all the rest of it. Though bizarrely, most of them seem to be played by Brits these days in the movies, so I don't know what that says. But yeah, so I think he holds an extra special place in our hearts because, you know, he's our only one, you know.
Yeah, and you can't be a fan of Sherlock Holmes like you can be a fan of James Bond. It has to be James Bond.
Absolutely, yeah.
I would agree with that. I mean, as much as, you know, clearly with my horrific New York accent, you could tell I'm from America. I would love to feel like I'm a super fan, but I almost feel like sometimes I'm borrowing James Bond. There's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't make me less of a fan or less appreciative. But I do feel like somebody had thrown a comment. It was not complimentary up on one of my YouTube channels, and he goes, "Wow, this guy's a real Anglophile. You know, he really loves everything British." And at first I was going to be like, "Hey, tosser," you know, and then I'm like, first of all, tosser's a British term. What are you doing? But I'm like, I think he might be right in the sense that I love the British pomp and circumstance. I love even the sardonic attitude of the British of, you know, feeling like we're a grumpy bunch and we're the only grumpy bunch in the world, which is very British in and of itself to think that. Yeah. And then James Bond. I mean, James Bond, I feel like sometimes I've adopted that, but I guess nothing wrong with that.
No, man, it's whatever you're into at the end of the day. I feel like one of the major things I've learned in life, you know, I often say it to people, it's like when you're a kid and you look at all the grown-ups, you think all of those grown-ups have it nailed. They understand everything. They know what's going on. And then that one day when you grow up, you will also be like that. And then you do grow up and you think, holy shit, there are so many people who've got no fucking clue about the first thing about what they're doing in life. And there's so many of those people that will sit on the sidelines and judge you for liking something or whatever. And that comment on your YouTube is a perfect example of that. Like the sort of person who will sit there and be like, I'm going to put this negative shit out into the world today. Now I feel better. You know what I mean? That's somebody you just don't want to pay any attention to whatsoever. Like for me, there might have been a time where I'd have done that in the past, but like especially when you create anything, if you're, you know, like I mean, dude, your output on YouTube is incredible. Like I don't know where you find the time to make as many videos as you do. It blows my mind. But like if you're somebody that puts yourself up like that and creates something and puts something up, it's kind of like those people who sit on the sidelines and just criticize aren't really doing anything of value. You know what I mean? You would, if you were creating something of value, you would understand how worthless that comment is to make, so you wouldn't make it to anybody else, you know?
Yeah.
And then just don't.
So quick question for you, because one of the things as I was prepping for this video was really thinking about the fan things, the creation, as you're now calling it, which I'm going to adopt very quickly, of JBR as a group, not Tom Sears, not Chris, but JBR as a group have done some amazing fan events. You've done locations, you've done videos, you've done meetups, and then you've actually expanded that and said, you know something, we can't be everywhere at once. If you're in Philadelphia, let's have a Philadelphia chapter, and you guys meet up and have a lot of fun. What was the germ? What was the vision behind making all of those meetups and going beyond the podcast?
I don't know if there ever was one, to be honest. I think it was just a case of if there was one, I remember some of the dudes from your neck of the woods, actually. I think it was the JBR Philly group, and they went to Vegas. And they all had their JBR t-shirts on, and they were on the water gun game from Diamonds Are Forever at Circus. And they sent some pictures through, and I was like, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen in all my life, you know. And then I think that was I know Dobson set up a JBR South Coast meetup group for some of the kind of, you know, the locals down on the south coast of England. I think that was the first one. And then some cropped up in the States. So it was an organic thing, really. It wasn't a, hey, you should all go and do this. It was just like people that kind of did it themselves, really.
And you guys did even a bit of an offshoot at the Piz Gloria celebration, the On Her Majesty's Secrets. Didn't you have like a little bit of a bridge event?
Yeah, well, the Piz Gloria thing was definitely first, and I mean, there is no topping that, man. I mean, it was just so amazing, and everybody who was on that trip with us now to this day talks about it, mentions it at least once a week. Like, oh, wasn't that amazing? But then that was Chris organised this whole extra bolt-on thing at the end where we did the GoldenEye Dam, Goldfinger's Factory. All sorts of things. We went down to Lake Como, and we spent, you know, another week just on the road because they're all relatively close together. They're all within maybe 2 hours drive. Piz Gloria, GoldenEye Dam, Lake Como. It's all roughly in the same area. So we just knocked a load of those out in 1 week, and it was man, it was amazing. It was so cool.
I find some of the most incredible experiences, the most amazing events, are the ones that come from the minds of a fan, because they know. You know, it's that whole idea, if you can walk in my shoes and experience what I'm experiencing, then you know me. So they know what a fan likes. They know what a fan hates. You know, they hate lines. They hate inaccuracies. But they love these moments. They love food, and they love swag and giveaway. Whatever it is, they know what the person wants to encounter, which is, I mean, to me, and we're going to get to this in a second, I would think it's very hard for a company who isn't a fan, or who doesn't have a finger on the pulse of a fan, to really come out of the woodwork and build something organically and say, here it is, here's your event, without the fan interaction.
Yeah, well, do you know what? I think a great example of something to talk about is the Secret Cinema thing that they did last summer in England, Casino Royale, obviously. And that's what we were talking about last time you were on JBR, wasn't it? That was it.
That's right.
Joe came along. And I can't imagine that being put together by anybody other than somebody who genuinely loved Bond in every way, shape, or form. Yeah. I think Joe was saying he went in there, and he's typically hard to impress with things, but he was just like, holy shit, the level of detail and accuracy they've got in that thing was unreal, and it just was. It blew my mind. So yeah, I think you definitely need that. And even when you sort of step outside the box a little bit, you look at something like Austin Powers, those movies, you know, Mike Myers adores Bond. Like, you don't, right. It's not, I don't look at those films as like a piss take of Bond, even though on the surface it is, but you can't go that deep on something without having a genuine love for it. You know, it's just, it adds so much of an extra flavor to it, you know?
I agree. And when we had the chance to meet with the creative directors at our little shindig that we had before Secret Cinema, one of the things that I remarked to somebody was I had a lot of scrutiny for them, that I was trying to look for the corporate trappings of individuals that put on shows and events and placate the fan. What I found was these were two very creative fans that have actually worked their way into making a vocation out of this. They were fans first, and then raised their hand and said, we love this, we love this. Let's create an immersive, journey for other people like us. And I think that's why it's so successful.
Yeah, man. What do you think? Let me pose you a question, though, right?
Yeah.
What if that was the case, where you'd worked your way into something and you had a chance to, something in the world of Bond was now your profession, or at least there was a huge project you were working on that was your thing. Do you think that would take away from your love or your fandom on some level? Because when something becomes work, it's a different beast, isn't it?
Right.
It's like, for me, way back in the day, I was in a band in my 20s. I lived and breathed the guitar. I was doing it all day, every day. And then one day I woke up and I was like, I'm not sure if I'm even enjoying this anymore, And that there is that thing where you can take something you love too far and then you end up losing that spark. So what do you think about that when it comes to Bond?
I'm going to start with a phrase that people tend to use. Don't show me how the sausage is made. So my whole thing, I love sausage. Don't show me how it's made. So the whole thing is, I think, first of all, if I turned it into vocation, it would take on a new pressure, a new feeling that would, of course, change it. I don't know if it would change it 180. I don't think it would turn it into this burdensome thing. Be a great retirement situation. But I'll tell you what would change, and maybe has changed in some cases. And that is when you start to get close and see behind the scenes. So as a fan from afar and you watch the movies, they're magical. The trailer comes out, marketing campaigns come out, all these things. Then you watch the movie and it's like, it just washes over you in this glowing, magical way. Somebody wove a magic wand. When you get close to it and you see the trappings behind it, maybe some of the arguments, some of the mishaps, some of the attitudes, then suddenly, it's that whole thing of don't meet your heroes, don't see how the sausage is made. Suddenly your stomach starts to churn. You're like, this isn't as pretty. And it's starting to taint that wonderful magical washing that goes on. Yeah. I'm not there yet, happily. I'm not even close, because you and I have no official affiliation. Yeah. But there are moments where you get kind of like, you take a peek around a corner and you see like, some of the strings and you're like, oh shit, no. Like, I don't want to hear that story. And the more you go from fan to occupation, that's got to happen. It's got to be a side effect.
Yeah, it does. And I think it's something, even there is a danger of it, even with something like what we do as super fans, knocking out content all the time. It's like I was saying, like you're knocking out videos every 5 minutes, it seems, and it's incredible. I don't know how you do it. Like I know how to do one podcast a week. One podcast a week is like, woof, that's tricky enough. So there is that danger in anything really. But yeah, interesting. I think for me, it makes me value when you do hear things behind the scenes that are positive. For me, it makes me value those things all the more. Like, for example, Sir Roger, God bless him. Like, you never hear a bad word said about that dude. Yeah. And then you meet somebody like Gareth who worked for him, and you can tell that love is real. It's not like this is my job, so I have to say nice stuff about Roger. Right. There's a lot of actors out there who are definitely the other way. You just know it, But like, you chat to someone like Gareth, and you know that love was real and genuine. And that makes me want to celebrate Roger even more for being that,
I gravitate to brands and even like events, like Secret Cinema, when they genuinely seem like they have a very positive attitude to what they're doing and a positive attitude to the fans. And it's kind of a dovetail into my next question that I wanted to kind of throw out to you, and maybe we can have a chat around this. But I mean, obviously there is a massive an important engine behind Bond, and that's Eon and Danjak and the powers that be, as we call them. How do you think, or what's your perception of how they engage the fans, or what they're doing for the fans, and what's your general opinion?
I would say they could do a lot more. I think the way I look at that, right, is if you look at something like Disney, this huge thing, right, conventions going on for Star Wars and all the rest of it all over the world. And there is, I envy the Star Wars crowd because they've got, they do that Star Wars celebration thing, and there's a lot happening. You go to Disney World and there's this huge thing now. There's a lot happening. And for us lot, there isn't. It's sort of like the bare bones. But at the same time, they are essentially a small family business. That's the thing. That is the difference. Disney is this huge, some would say soulless corporation, and Eon aren't that. They are literally the family run thing passed down from Cubby to Barbara. So I get why that might be, because I know they are super protective of their thing. And when you look at the history, like the whole Thunderball thing and all the stuff that happened with Kerith McCloy, you can totally understand why they would be keep things at arm's length and be very protective, because you just would be, Bond to them is their entire livelihood. It's everything. I mean, you imagine Barbara being born into that family and living that life. Of course you would be protective of it, and you wouldn't want anyone to screw it up. And yeah, and I've heard, again, I have no window into what they're thinking at all, but when I've heard some stuff about like the lack of, toys and stuff for kids, is that they don't like the idea of them being toy guns and stuff like that. And so, when Lego bring out it's a car, it's not Bond holding his gun or something like that.
Right.
Which I kind of get. Like, at the same time, I ran around with plastic guns as a kid, and I don't think it did me any harm. But it's a different world these days, and things change, and you don't see that happening anymore. And I kind of I understand. It's a shame, I guess, but I kind of understand the thought process behind it. In terms of events and stuff, I think, again, bringing up Secret Cinema, I think they did a great job aligning with those guys, because that was such an amazing. Even if you went there and you didn't engage with all the stories and all the rest of it, just to observe what that was. Was an amazing thing, like probably everybody listening to this, I feel like we would all love the equivalent of Star Wars World or whatever it's called at Disneyland to go to and do that. I mean, we kind of did have that last summer with Secret Cinema, but we would love more of that, huge conventions and all the rest of it. We would, of course, love all that. At the same time, I kind of understand why that stuff isn't as common based on the scale of their operation. They want to make Bond films, and they want to do the best possible job. And there is a danger when you dilute that a little bit, that you take your eye off the ball a little bit, I think. Maybe.
I think you're right. No, I think you're right. And scale, I think, has an important play here, because, I mean, if there's 15 to 20 people that work at Eon total, and you compare that to a Disney with 10,000s of people, it's a different animal. So I think what Eon does is they rely heavily on other agencies, as well as the distributors, United Artists Releasing, Universal, MGM, to create that wider resonance around PR and marketing and events, because they're, again, 15 to 20 people. Not all those 15 to 20 are even in marketing. I will say this, though. You struck up a very interesting chord, because I like that Eon has done something formal with places like Spyscape in New York City, like Elements and Solden, Bond in Motion in your neck of the woods, for example, and then, Secret Cinema. So there are those moments where we can kind of immerse ourselves officially. I don't even put this officially, get rid of the quotes, into these Bond things, and even turning a little bit of a blind eye to Bond World and Pitt's Glory. I think there are those moments where you can find them. What I'm craving still, and I think about this a lot, are those events that a Disney might do around Marvel or Star Trek or Star Wars, where, and this is a case study, it's an actual case study, you can look on Google, but there was a time not too long ago where Lucasfilm, not Disney, before the buyout, Lucasfilm was suing fans left and right for wearing Stormtrooper costumes, or buying or selling a costume piece here and there. They were just, I mean, their bevy of attorneys were fat and robust. They were all over the place. And I mean, just swinging cease and desist everywhere. And then suddenly they came to the conclusion, and it's like, what if we got, now here's a crazy idea. What if our biggest marketing engine were our fans? Maybe they're not this, post in a journal or an ad in a campaign. Maybe they're our fans, because one fan can tell 1,000 fans. And so and it's a case study, it's beautiful to watch. They got on board, and then when Disney took over, they even went more balls to the wall. They just said, something, we're going to have locational events where people come together, and the inertia, this is what they called it, the marketing inertia of these individuals, we're just going to let it go. We're going to let it be organic. It's going to be a little nebulous, but we're going to get comfortable with that. Eon, I believe, they don't, this is speculation, I don't believe they like nebulous, which is right on them. They've been the custodial guards of the Bond series for so long. It's a family-run business. It's relatively small, so they've got to be, I'm sure, overly careful. But I just wish they would crack the egg of those events and fan-based things just a little bit more. That's kind of my 2020 wish.
Yeah, I suppose me too, 100%. And especially when you consider the gaps between the films in recent years, you know what I mean? It's like, it would be lovely to have something, even if it wasn't once a year, every second year they would have some big convention or something. It would be lovely, I think. Yeah, I've often said it. I think the danger is I remember, like, this is going back a while now, but if you looked at the highest grossing movie series of all time, it was Bond, right? This is going back a few years.
Yeah.
And then obviously when Bond started out, there was little to no competition, all through those early years, nothing going on. And he sort of hit the 80s, I guess. And, late 70s, 80s, you had your Star Wars, your Indiana Jones. And then by the end of Timmy's run, you're going up against Lethal Weapon and Batman and all these things to take attention away from Bond. And it is a different world we live in these days. You often see people say, I wish they could do a movie every other year like they used to. And it's like, I'm not sure that's a possible thing these days, given, just the climate of the world we're in terms of, you look at Marvel and it's every 6 months there's a new film coming out, and Star Wars and all the rest of it. It is a tricky thing. But I do think there's I suppose what it all boils down to is I'm really curious to see what happens post No Time to Die, because I get it, especially with this film. It seems to have taken there's lots of, rumblings going on. Like it wasn't a smooth path from start to finish with this one. So I get it. And obviously it was delayed and all the rest of it. And, directors changing hands, composers changing hands and all that kind of stuff. Like, I can imagine behind the scenes that was a nightmare. Like, I remember back in the day at your school play or whatever, you go backstage at the school play and everybody's buzzing around like crazy, and out the front everything looks serene and peaceful. I imagine that's that was going on. But I just have this gut feeling, and I might be wrong, but I have this gut feeling that once Daniel's gone, No Time to Die is finished, that they're gonna look at selling. And I don't think I would have thought that if George Lucas hadn't sold Lucasfilm. And maybe even they wouldn't have either. Maybe they'd have looked at that and thought, maybe one day. Just because the language that was used, sort of like in there, in that, I forget what it was now. That you were there in New York when Daniel did that talk. He had the Logan Lucky haircut, and he was set in. Somebody might have asked. It might have even been you. Somebody asked him in the audience about the next Bond film, and he was like, "Oh, we're all just kind of tired at the moment." Blah blah blah. And I'm like, there's some of the language that's being used, and Michael G. Wilson's obviously a lot older these days, and Barbara is making other movies, Eon's making other movies, with the rhythm section and all this kind of stuff. I do wonder whether they're thinking that their time with Bond is drawing to a close. When you think about it, 25 movies, Daniel's last one, the most successful it's been in decades. The most successful Bond's been in decades. Dude, if you were going to bow out, now would be a good time, don't you think? It would be post Bond 25, because by the language that they were all using back then, like the challenge after this one is, okay, we either throw a bunch of money at Daniel and get him to come back for another one, which might happen, or Daniel does leave, and they've got to reintroduce the whole thing. They've got to find the next guy. That's a monumental task, and I'm so curious to see what happens.
I'll tell you, it's an interesting discussion, because the ending of No Time to Die could be a negotiation tool for a sale. In other words, if you kill off your character, that's not a great negotiation tale, because the fans will overreact and they'll say, oh, I guess Bond as a franchise is dead. And if you go and try to sell that franchise, if I was a buyer, if I was Disney, for example, I would say, like, guys, that would be killing the goose with the golden egg. I mean, I don't think that would be a smart move. So it could actually factor into these alleged multiple endings. But I'll tell you this, too. I also think they are potentially going to sell because of one very important fact. They really haven't kind of trailed out any of the newer, younger blood, like Greg Wilson. Like, to me, you would have Greg Wilson show up to some of these PR events. He would have been in Jamaica if they were going to continue with the family-run business, but I haven't seen that.
Yeah, I think it's just a gut feeling, and I might be wrong, but I feel like if I was in their shoes, now would be the time to go, And I think, yeah, man, how do you? Again, it's the ultimate question that you would have asked back after Connery left, back after You Only Live Twice. How on earth do you replace Daniel Craig? And of course you could, but it's also that thing of, this isn't like a a transition from, Roger to Tim or Tim to Pierce. This is the dude who's raised the game in Bond and made it more successful than it's been in decades. And it's like, how do you follow that one? And it's like, do you then go? So you cast the new guy. He comes along. It's Bond 26. Are you then back down the ladder? And you've got to make that slow climb up again over 3 films, and then have your next big hit. And then, you know what I mean? It's like, that's a tall order to face. And it's like, back in the day with Rog, there was so many times when it was like, oh no, this is the last one. Oh no, this is the last one. And then it was like 4 films later, that was his actual last one. And it's like, you would always, you always want, talking about your golden goose, Daniel Craig's obviously the golden goose. You would always prefer to get that guy, just come back and do one more, you know what I mean? And make our lives easy. And because you know what you're going to get, you have that already, rather than getting some total fresh blood and do that whole thing. You just don't know. Yeah, it will be a scary time for anybody. Who knows? They might bring in some dude who is amazing, and they really pull out all the stops like they did for Casino Royale and blow us all out of the water. You just don't know. It's a lot of questions.
It's true. The fans are definitely going to be clamoring. All right, so we're gonna change things up a little bit. I want to get a little bit into Tom Sears' head, if you don't mind. I want to get a little.
You sure, man? That's a dangerous place to be. Good Lord.
And it smells. I thought it smelled bad from the outside. Little tauntaun joke. So you clearly, since we're still on the theme of fans, I would categorize you as a super fan. And it's not that you could leap tall buildings in a single bound. It's that you've taken your fandom and you've marched to a beat of a different drummer, in the sense of really putting yourself out there. You put a lot of time, effort, agenda. You're now literally corralling other people with JBR. You had to resuscitate it after, Cher left Sonny and Cher. You've had to do all these. This is going to play back great. But talk to me. You've got trials and tribulations of the podcasting world. What's the reward? Like, why do you get up and do it every day?
Fuck knows, man. No idea. Yeah.
And scene.
No, I think that's a good question. Like, I suppose when we first started it, it was just out of pure something fun to do. You know what I mean? And it was something Chris and I would just back and forth thing on Facebook Messenger for 4 years before it was even an idea. Longer than that, actually. And it was just, let's do this for fun. And then it blossomed into this huge thing that we never dreamed it would. Yeah. And then, like, we're getting on for 6 years in now. We just did the 6th Christmas Boxing Day quiz, which is crazy. And all that kind of stuff. And of course, like the thing with Chris is a perfect example. It's like, life changes and, different things happen and new priorities change and all the rest of it. That's obviously a reason why sort of Chris stepped away and all the stuff. So there is that. And it's for me, it was kind of like, I just think I would really miss it. I think I did think for a while, I was like, maybe 5 years, Bond 25's done. Let's knock it on the head, after Chris left. And then I don't know. I just thought I would just really miss it too much. And I do need that outlet. In the 7 or 8 months we weren't doing anything, we were having our break. I was just like, it was nice to have a break to begin with, because obviously keeping up with the schedule is a challenge. It was nice to have that break. Yeah. But then, man, when they released that little teaser of where they released the title of the film and Daniel walks into frame, I just felt that little buzz, that little tingle down the spine. And I'm like, it's not that I want somebody to talk to about this. I need somebody to talk to about this. It's therapy, and my poor missus can't put up with me talking to her about Bond any more than she already does. So I have to do something. So it was, I think it was that's the reward, definitely, is that I get to be like, okay, Hans Zimmer's just been announced as the composer. What does everybody think? And I need to know. I need to talk about it, and I need people's opinions on it. I need it. I need to rush it back and forth. There is, of course, a limit. there is such a thing as too much opinion, where you go, I've had enough about that. I don't want to talk about it anymore. When we did 30 Days of Spectre, a podcast every day for 30 days when Spectre came out, by the end of that, I was like, I could go a good 6 months without talking about Bond now. I really could. I could do that rest, just to reboot a little bit. But yeah, I think more than anything, it's a need. Yeah.
I've actually heard it described almost as a therapy. You've got hobbies, and some hobbies are really dedicated to the fact that you've got so much stress and pressure in your everyday world, and this is a nice little escape valve that you can open up, and so it's part of your therapeutic moment. Now, what you've done at JBR, and why you have, I think, such a monstrous following, is because the side effect of your therapy and the others that are doing this with you is that you entertain, you educate, you inform, you emotionally connect, and then you've got big things that happen within your circumstance, like the Dan Romer thing. That you broke this huge story that now I think is being picked up by the AP wires and every other blogger and vlogger and podcaster, and then this whole trajectory with Hans Zimmer, and like there's some ownership with JBR in helping to really make us a part of that story, that kind of immersive moment. So the side effect of your psychological therapy is reaping some amazing rewards for people.
Yeah, man. And I think the thing with that we heard that somebody came to us, I think it was the very end of October. I think it might have even been the 1st of November. We put the whatever that Friday was anyway, we just put out a Dan Romer podcast, JW and I talking about, okay, let's look into this dude and listen to some of his tracks and stuff. And then literally 10 minutes after I published the episode, I got this message from somebody going, I think Dan Romer's been fired. And I was like, oh my God, the timing on that couldn't be any more perfect.
Wow.
And he obviously, I can't reveal anything because it's an anonymous thing, but he gave forward some like a visual piece of evidence to support it, and the story behind it sounded legit. It wasn't just a, hey, I've heard this, because you never know about those things. This was enough to go, oh, okay, whoa, if this is bullshit, you've gone to a long way to try and convince me by doing all these things, right? So I thought, okay, the only thing you can do is put it out. And then literally it was 2 whole months later, I think it was January 6th is when the Zimmer news broke. So it's 2 whole months of people going, is JBR full of crap? Like, what did they make that up or whatever? But the silly thing is, though, is I think there is this thing that if you do something like that, you put out a rumor like that, it's putting your reputation on the line.
Is.
If it doesn't come, if it doesn't come true, then you're a bad person or whatever. But at the same time, anybody who has any kind of outlet who publishes something like that, no matter even if you're the dude at Variety or whatever, if somebody comes to you and says, I've heard this, and you choose to report on it, it's like all you're really doing is reporting what somebody else has told you because you think there might be some truth to it. And as long as you say, I don't know if this is true or not, but this is what's come in, that's interesting, isn't it? You know what I mean? That's the important piece of information.
Well, there's a couple of things
that what you want.
Yeah, you guys do two things actually that I think is really responsible. And that is, number one, you always say, take this with a grain of salt, ... which I think is very smart. In other words, this is speculation or rumor. Number two, I think you guys are also very good about painting the full story, like saying like, well, this could happen, but nothing's been announced. It's not official. I think you're responsible about it is the one word I could gravitate to.
But it just is what it is,
Yeah, and here's a little fun technique that I'll share with you, although you probably, or Jack Lugo, I should say, probably knows this, but on days when some news breaks or an image comes out, like the day that image of Bond in the Henley with the big wheel behind him from Empire magazine came out, if you looked at Instagram, literally you could have quickly scrolled and it would all be the same image because everybody's posting. So what I did was I decided, oh, you know what? I'm going to put a unique post that has nothing to do with that image. It was one of my most liked images for 2019.
Really?
Because people were scrolling through and seeing the same image. And all of a sudden there's like, oh, whoa, there's a different image.
Yeah.
So just because of, to use a Skyfall quote, the sake of variety, sometimes you can stand out.
Yeah, yeah. No, that makes perfect sense, actually. Yeah, absolutely. It was like we all rushed to when they released the title, and we all downloaded the font and made our own logos.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Tom, first of all, thank you. The
No worries.
problem would have been if I tried to wrestle with these 4 questions on my own, I'd be up all night in a fetal position, in a deep sweat, sucking my thumb. You saved me from that.
No
So
worries, man.
thanks for being my psychiatry couch.
No worries, dude. I feel every time I speak to you, I feel like I'm at a Spectre meeting because you've got your big Doctor Evil Blofeld chair, and I feel like I'm at the boardroom. So if I say anything wrong, I'm going to end up being thrown to the alligators or something.
Don't let me interrupt you. You
Very
could touch
nice.
it. You could touch it if you want. All right, my friend. Thank you so much.
No worries.
If people are watching this and they're not listening to JBR, thank you and wake you up from your coma and go subscribe and listen to JBR. Lots of great things. Watch JBR. Listen to Tom and his Merry Men. It's amazing. And I'm sure you've got some amazing new things coming up in the new year, so we'll watch out for that. But this has been Tom Sears and David Zaritsky from the Bond Experience, and we'll see you all real soon. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks for watching this episode. If you want to be up on the latest from the Bond Experience, just click on this subscribe and subscribe to our channel. You're going to get all the latest and greatest information, plus some exclusive content. And by the way, speaking of content, here's something especially for you, just because we know you. Talk to you soon.